Thank you very much. Your great talk.
Pleasure.
And well, first of all, I awfully envy, Minerva, because it sounds like you can do anything.
Almost anything.
Having said that, we, some big university, traditional, we could call ourselves dinosaur. There are so many constraints and limitations. And in particular, in Kyoto, like in case of Kyoto University, we don't have the land. We need more land. But that's not something we can create. But it's online, you can do anything, for example. Everything you care about is, I see, the student-centered learning, right? And how you could maximize the student's experience and learning. And I'd like to hear, how did you, well, you very successful in a startup, in Snapfish, but then what was what made the transition, from that kind of a business industry, to education? And there must be something for you as a student, you're not too happy about. Would you mind talking about that?
Sure. I very much believe in the importance of education, obviously. I wouldn't have started a university if I did not. And when I was in my first year at the University of Pennsylvania, I took a course, a full year course, on both the history of universities and how universities engage or interact with their communities. And what I realized in that class is that the great American universities were not set up in order to teach their students a vocation. Now, some initially were founded that way. So Harvard and Yale were initially created to teach priests. And so they were vocational schools. But the schools that were set up just before and after the Revolutionary War in the United States were set up in order to educate students to lead, in order to have graduates that would be future senators and presidents and heads of corporations and heads of civil society. And in a world which rejected monarchy, which rejected that the person who was this child of the person in charge would be the person that would run in the future. So any modern society that we know, heads of corporations are not necessarily the children of the previous CEO. They're not, the prime minister, the members of the Diet. They're not just children of who came before. You have to earn your right, but you also then have to not just learn a vocation, because you don't graduate at 22 years old or 18 or what have you, knowing that you're going to be somebody who will shape the lives of other people. So you have to both have the capacity to be successful in a career, but also know that when it is time for you to be called upon by society to make decisions that impact the lives of other people, that you'll be able to make those decisions systemically. And the greatness of the American liberal arts education model, which has nothing to do with knowledge for knowledge's sake or learning poetry or any of the nonsense that today has been interpreted as liberal arts. The concept, the term, the liberal arts, came from an ancient Roman philosophy of studying the various disciplines of society, the liberal arts, such that you could make decisions when you're called upon by society to govern. And so I realized universities were not doing that, and I tried to fix my university to do that. Right. But maybe they were an existing Ivy League university and they didn't feel a need to change.
Yeah. Yeah, here in Japan, I think we often see the education as kind of a school-based education as a kind of pipeline. So, once you get out of the, university, then you just jump into, society or jobs, right? But I think, hearing what you said, I think it's becoming really important that while, some students in university, in some college, to raise their kind of social responsibility. It's almost like bringing society into education system rather than prepare somebody for the real society out there. Right. What do you think about?
Well, it's I think it's not just crucial to bring society in, but it's crucial for universities to understand, especially the best universities in the world, that the determinant of whether or not their graduates are going to be successful, the determinant of whether or not they're going to have impact on society, is probably not going to be how great of an electrical engineer are they. It is going to be how can they work beyond the field of electrical engineering, right? Because being a great electrical engineer is wonderful, but running a company that employs electrical engineers has a far greater impact. Being at the cutting edge of discovery in electrical engineering has a far greater impact. Whenever you get to the point of production, of creation, you cannot create from within a field, right? Because much of discovery occurs at the intersection of fields. Much of the impact of society occurs at the heads of organizations. And so universities have a special duty to prepare students in this broad systemic education. And the sad fact is that for the past 50 years, universities have holistically not done that anywhere in the world, which one could argue is the reason we have such a global crisis in leadership.
Thank you. I think we typically see students as consumers of knowledge. And typically, the university is giving the knowledge, to the students. But I think that is really becoming, of course, obsolete. But do you believe in the students becoming creators of knowledge while they are, in education or schools? Because right now, they don't, if it's an undergraduate, they are not asked to produce like a new values, or inventions. That's not the part of their expected outcomes. But I think the world is, feeling to need something like that.
Yeah, I think it's so we believe very much that before undergraduates will receive their degree at Minerva, they need to create a novel work at a professional level, which means a postgraduate school level, even though they're undergraduates, in order to be ready to go out into the world. Having said that, the biggest problem with students being able to do that in any system is that they're just not prepared to. And so, and the issue is that teaching your introductory level course 1, introductory level course 2, intermediate course 3, intermediate course 4, etc., doesn't get them ready, right? And so this is why the Minerva system and the Minerva education is so crucial, and also why before we enable our students to start working on their capstone project, which they begin in their junior year and they consummate in their fourth year, we have them practice in a structured environment for 3 years, right, about what it means to create knowledge in a variety of fields. And so, the whipsaw that we see now in higher education is to say, oh, okay, well, what we teach is irrelevant because our students are useless after 1, 2, 3 years in school. So instead, let's abandon that and go the other way, which is let students do whatever they want. And that's equally bad, right? And so the problem is that this directionless back and forth between I'm just going to disseminate all the content to, oh, forget dissemination, just do research on your own from day one. None of this is useful. What's useful is to actually think about the scaffold, right? Would then enable student to understand what does knowledge mean. Before I go and create knowledge, I should understand with a certain level of confidence what hypothesis generation is like, what kinds of conclusions can be drawn from what kind of experimental conditions, etc. That requires an education, but it's not a disciplinary education. It's a cross-disciplinary education. And this is something universities are not used to.
I see, thank you. And I was very struck when at the end of your presentation, you said we should use the technology to make the impossible possible. Not just, we tend to, we just look at so what we've been doing with MOOC, open courseware, learning management system, and so on. It's been supporting some students and faculty members to do what they have been pretty much doing, but maybe give more flexibility, some time, place, maybe accelerating learning, some speed, efficiency. But again, really think about, we really think about, like just you said, things we have never thought about or tried. So I think that's what people are so excited about Minerva as a kind of social experiment in that sense. But what's on your plate? I mean, you have accomplished already so much, and I'm pretty sure you've learned a lot by working with real students, because it's different, from. So, for example, I have so many questions, but one thing I like to know is how happy your students are, because from kind of I have freshman. My first son is a freshman at college. He's enjoying being there, meaning just having a real campus life, being part of clubs and that kind of stuff. So while the Minerva is so great, experimental, there are some kind of a missing, comparing to the existing traditional schools, in terms of what students really feel. I'm part of this community or culture, for example.
Well, the community at Minerva is much, much stronger than a traditional university, simply because of this common intellectual language students have. They all live together. They're in very small cohorts, so they all know one another. So it's designed to be a much, much tighter organization and community than any other university by far. But Minerva is not optimized for fun. Right now, students wind up having a great time. They live in San Francisco. They go to live in Berlin, Buenos Aires, Seoul, Hyderabad, etc. So it's an amazing experience. You get to learn a lot, but you will spend about 50 hours a week on your schoolwork, beginning in the very first week. Now, in the United States, that is unheard of. In the United States, when I was an undergraduate 20-some years ago, students at the same institution spend 20% fewer hours on their studies than they did 30 years before. Today, students spend 20% less time than I did when I was an undergraduate 20-some years ago. And so what American universities are doing is that they're destroying the quality of education. The time spent in studies is down by more than a third over the last 50 years. And at the same time, they're inflating grades. And so at Yale University, for example, in 1963, 14% of grades were A's, 1-4. In 2013, 50 years later, 68% of grades were A's.
Inflation.
Huge inflation. And so you spend less and less time working, and you get better and better grades. And so what that means is that the university is there to have fun, right? I'm going to spend $250,000 to party for 4 years. Well, that is clinically insane, right? Imagine that you have at Kyoto University right now the future Prime Minister of Japan, right? You have at Kyoto University right now the CEOs of 100 of the 500 most important companies of Japan in the future, right? They're in your hands. They're under your care and feeding. Now, what is your job with those individuals? Is your job to make sure that they can drink and party and, play whatever stupid games they want to play? Or is it your responsibility to make sure that when they're the CEOs of those corporations, when they're the presidents and prime ministers of countries, when they're doing leading edge research, when they're journalists reporting on those individuals holding the powerful responsible, that they know systemically how to solve problems, how to analyze situations, how to creatively create solutions, how to work and communicate well with others? That's your responsibility. And so, yeah, there are far, far, far fewer clubs and activities, and there are no fraternities and no sports teams, and that's a good thing.
You might want to say it's fun, real fun, for those intellectual fun, so for students.
Oh, absolutely. Students are engaged. They love their classes. They love their cities. They love the community. So they have they have a great time, but they're working really hard.
And enjoying.
It, yeah.
And so there are a lot of faculty members and staff people here. How about fun for faculty members and instructors? Because that sounds pretty tight kind of environment. And also that it's great, some visualizing the students' learning process, and also the who is speaking up, and it's in green, red, or, I imagine your instructor, I'm challenging you, devil's advocate. It must be really intense, for faculty members, instructors to teach in that kind of environment, using that kind of a cutting-edge technology. And but they must, I think, enjoy teaching in this way. And what do you hear from your instructors?
Well, first, very much so. Last week was our first all-team or our all-team meeting of the year. So every year we bring all Minervans together from the faculty and staff for 2 days in San Francisco. And just the energy among the faculty is something I've never seen at a university.
Do you pay well?
We pay okay. We pay fine. We pay fine. But I think far more importantly is, first and foremost, the faculty know each one of their students, which is unheard of in a traditional university. So every single one of our faculty know each of the students far better than they've ever known their students at either research universities or liberal arts colleges, right, which are basically failed research universities, because the professors at liberal arts colleges still get judged on their research, they still get hired on that. It's not based on teaching, it's not based on all the things that they would like you to think it is. It's merely that they are using the same types of standards. And their career focus is unfortunately not on the students as it should be. So in that regard, our professors get a very, very close interaction, very close relationship with the students. Secondly, the classes themselves are incredibly energizing, right? Rather than the professor having to talk for 90 minutes, right, like they do at any other university, right? They have to actually engage the students, make sure that they're debating with one another and questioning them and leading them to understand and apply what it is that they're learning. So it's incredibly fast-paced and exciting. we have a weekend where we bring students to San Francisco who are selected by Minerva to figure out whether or not it's the right place for them. And overwhelming, almost everybody that comes to these weekends winds up matriculating because they understand what Minerva really is. But probably the most important part of that weekend is that the students take a 45-minute class on our platform, on the Active Learning Forum. And at the end of the class, I survey the students and I say, how long was that? And I hear anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 minutes. And I say, well, it was 45 minutes. And they say, you're lying. There's no way that was a 45-minute class. It's impossible, right? Because when have we been in a class that was 45 minutes long that felt like it was 15 minutes long? That almost never happens. And so the faculty really appreciate what it is that the mission of what we're trying to do. They understand that these students are going to be the ones that are going to shape the future. They understand that within them is the responsibility to make sure that they're prepared. And they appreciate the fact that the environment is fast and fast-paced and very interesting. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
So to us, to almost everybody who has been experiencing this traditional higher education, it's 100% seminar-based, 100% active learning. It's almost scary and shocking, right? But when we look at, for undergraduate education, but when we look at the graduate education, that's a common practice,
Absolutely.
of course. So is that fair to say you are kind of upgrading undergraduate educations to more like traditional, some graduate education?
Yeah, elements of that, absolutely. So in general, we do believe that because of MOOCs, because of adaptive learning, because of everything that is going to be coming, but frankly, everything that already exists, the role of the undergraduate education is, as it's currently conceived, is not very much worthwhile. So we believe that, if you actually think about the term undergraduate education, it should give you a hint about what the role of the degree is. Because the point of an undergraduate degree is to get you to have the core thinking principles so that when you pursue your field of expertise in graduate education, right, that you have your broad critical thinking, creative thinking, effective communication, effective interaction skills already in place. Universities don't do that, right? And so they've kind of abandoned the purpose of the term of the degree that they offer. Now, the good news is that today you can actually marry, for most things, both goals in one degree. Both provide the systemic general education while at the same time providing students the direction and a capacity to be able to choose a career and pursue that. And so it does require a merging of what previously graduate education, or what we currently think of what graduate education is, with the original goal of an undergraduate education, which has really been carved out. So, and ignoring what currently people think of as the first degree.
And as you may know, I'm a long-time doer and also advocate for open education. And I just don't want to see it's dying. Well, it's everywhere now. Yeah. But what assured me, what you just said, is sounded like it sounds like open education, over the last 20 years or so, has successfully built the foundation or operating system, sort of, and to enable someone, some visionary like you, some to implement, some this kind of a new model. So I think it's interesting that the MOOC, as you know, the New York Times defined the year 2012, the year of MOOC, right? And that's a 2012. And you started Minerva in 2014, correct? Or more before?
I started working on Minerva in 2010. And
But
then
around
the
the
first
same
student
time.
started in 2014. So this, you're exactly right, because without MOOCs, so when I started Minerva in 2010, MOOCs did not exist. You couldn't do multi-threaded video on the browser, right? It was impossible. There was almost everything about Minerva, if I wanted to launch the year I started, would have not worked. And what's remarkable is that in the 4 years between me starting to work on Minerva and the first class at Minerva starting, all of the conditions became right to enable us to exist. And that I had nothing to do with any of those things. And so in many ways it was very lucky, but the writing was very much on the wall, right? Yes, 2012 may have been the year of the MOOCs, but open educational resources online have been around for decades. They've been around as long as the internet has existed. And so there was a lot more attention, a lot more activity, which is really healthy and it's important. But you're exactly right in the sense that, what that field has done and will continue to do. There's a lot more work to be done. But what the whole open education movement will do is it will render completely and utterly useless anything a university has been doing over the last millennia as far as the dissemination of knowledge. And so 60, 70, sometimes 80 to 90% of the courses that universities currently offer, they will have no need to offer them in the future, right? And that's the shocking change that we're effectively anticipating.
To me, what's ironical is, as my Kyoto University colleagues have presented, we're so busy working on nicely packaging and disseminating the best of our education, so from Kyoto University. And then nothing bad about it. But it's, I don't want to say the thing of past, but we're not inventing. So somebody said, flipped classroom is innovations. Is it?
Yeah, so I'll give you a very controversial perspective, which is that it used to be that all classrooms used to be flipped, right? And that was what was referred to 50 years ago as doing your homework. And so when I was mentioning before, in 1963, when so few grades were A's, what happened was you did your reading at home, and then you came into class, and a professor, even though it was a lecture and all the rest, the professor would sometimes call on you, right? And if you didn't know the answer, you'd get thrown out of class, right? So what happened? Why did the classroom get unflipped? Because of grade inflation, not because of technology. There wasn't technology in the 1950s that we somehow lost, right? That became lost to humanity. What happened was the refusal of universities to flunk students out. And so what happened was a student doesn't do their homework one day, and the professor says, maybe embarrasses them, but there are no consequences. And so then the student says, you know what? I won't do my homework and I won't come to class because I don't want to be embarrassed. And that's okay because, again, you're not going to flunk. You just cram for this final and take your test. And this was the problem. So the problem with the lack of a flipped classroom had nothing to do with technology. It had to do with the fact that there were no Fs. And now, with the best technology that you can offer, you still won't be able to flip a classroom unless you flunk students out, right? Because you have to create a motivating system for them to do their work. Because guess what? All the flipped classroom does is that it takes a book, right, and it creates a video to illustrate what the book has said. But you know what? The book is pretty effective. If you read the book and actually do some exercises, you can learn something, right? It turns out that for hundreds of years, we've been able to learn by reading, right? And so there's nothing wrong with that format. And now at Minerva, when we have access to every MOOC in the world, have access to whatever resource we want. 80% of our assignments for students, right, that have them prepare, 80% of it is reading.
Oh, well, I put ourselves in a kind of awkward position here, and now my colleagues are looking at me as a very hostile kind of way.
20% is non-reading, so there are improvements, but you know it's not.
But here is $1 million question, if not the $1 billion question for you, entrepreneur and smart expert. What we, at the traditional universities ought to do with open education, because again, it's not just about doing things more efficiently, or personalization is also some very good, but I think we can. It's very difficult for traditional school systems to individualize, personalize outcomes. We can make multiple paths to same outcomes, but it's very difficult to personalize and providing educations to personalize their outcomes. So that's a different some challenge. But if let's say MOOC, of course we want to continue OpenCourseWare, MOOC, and so on. But what do you think as a visionary like to see? Because we are still producing this kind of education, open education resources, but we don't want to be seen as, so this is our, just a legacy, or will, so we just want to leave a footprint, the dinosaurs, in this world. But so that, what we could do in new ways in open education, so that new endeavors, like yours, could even fly higher, or also, it would also help us, traditional universities to keep evolving.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
So the easiest piece of advice I could give is put yourself in another university's shoes that this is a very non-Japanese thing to say, but that you do not respect. So imagine that you are talking to a university that has a history of doing very poorly for their students, have very low reputation. And now you're creating this great educational resources, right, from Kyoto University. And you are having conversation with the president of this other university. And you tell them, look, your professors are terrible. Let's be honest. Of course, this would never occur in Japan. But let's just assume that this is after a lot of sake and dinner, and you're joking around, and you say, look, your professors don't have this expertise. The students hate their classes. We have these great courses. They're already there. It's free. It's there for the sake of humanity. You should just use them, right? You should just use these courses and forget all of this nonsense that you're doing in class now, and then focus your resources on doing something really, really good because it's really important for university, right? So this makes a lot of sense. The people who are creating your courses are very proud of what they're doing. They're saying clearly, that this university
kind of focus and concentration is really important.
So that's a good thing. So now what I would say, take your own advice, because it's not only that university, right, which clearly shouldn't be teaching a course in thermodynamics if they can get a course in thermodynamics from Kyoto. You shouldn't be teaching a course on thermodynamics if you already have one, right? Don't teach it again. It's free. It's there. Okay. Thermodynamics is not going to change dramatically in the next 5 years, right? Maybe not in the next 10, right? And so now when you've got this information, and guess what? There may be a few other universities in Japan that are also quite good, and they're producing courses in other fields. They're doing those. Don't make your own. Use theirs, right? Actually use what you've worked so hard to build. And then think, now wait a second, I've given so much free time to my faculty. What should I be using them for?
Well, it reminds me, of course, everybody was rolling their eyeballs when MIT launched OpenCourseware in 2001. The world says it's suicidal. MIT is just killing themselves by just opening up all these resources. But I wrote about this in one of my books. But I thought, they are actually leaving part of them behind and make it open to the whole world, so that they can move, forward faster, because others also inherited, what they have created, invented, right? So that kind of trying to empty, self, so that you don't have nothing, you don't have anything, to be proud of, but you have to keep moving on to the new target. And is that fair to say?
Well, and MIT, mark my words, in a certain number of years, will follow the Minerva model, right? They're going to reject the idea of charging students money and time to learn basic information. They already started it about 1.5 years ago. They announced a master's program in supply chain management. They used to be a full-year master's that they cut in half. They took the entire first semester, which used to cost students $30,000, and they offered it for free. And if you want to take the test, it costs you $1,000. That's it. And so they took a $30,000 semester and brought it down to $1,000. And then anybody who did well, they let them go to MIT to do the second semester, where it was actually seminar-oriented, and get their master's, right? And I guarantee you that even though MIT will not say it this way, they're going to follow the Minerva model, right? Which is they're going to stop charging for those courses. And eventually, that's going to come to the undergraduate model. And when MIT does it, Harvard will do it. And when Harvard will do it, the rest of the Ivies will do it. When the Ivies do it, Virginia, Michigan, Berkeley will do it. Then the liberal arts colleges will do it. They'll have to, right? And at that point, Kyoto will also have to do it. And so rather than waiting for you to be required to go that route, do it first. You do it, right? You lead in this area. Don't follow, right? It's much better to lead, to prepare, rather than say, oh my God, I have the Minister of Education coming down on me. Why am I charging, Japanese students for what the Americans are giving their students for free now, right? I've got to do something right away. Yeah. Get ahead of it. Do it now.
That's, I think, the great news. In addition to our Ministry of Education, now we have another entity to heavily pressure, on us, so that
You're welcome.
we don't need to listen to what the ministry thinks. They want us to do. But again, we really need to think ahead, of them, and what other, some good top elite. It doesn't need to be elitish, universities, but again, those front runners, to do. And I came to the time, flight, of course. But would you end up and this session with sharing your wildest, boldest dream? Well, even it can go beyond Minerva. If Minerva, succeeds, you're an entrepreneur, so you want to keep moving on to the, next new exciting thing, I guess. But it's too early to say. Like John Lennon, imagine, what your dream higher education system is.
So my dream is very simple, which is every university in the world declares what it is teaching its students, and then actually teaches it, measures it, and enables for its broad application to anything the student does in the future. If we enable every university in the world to embrace scaffolded curriculum and fully active learning, we will change the course of humanity.
Oh, thank you very much. We'll continue with the panel session, some more. But please join me, some thanking. Of course, it's Ben's, some great insights and also free advice, for us. So thank you very much, Ben.
Pleasure. Thank you.